good morning, afternoon, whatever it is, because I think we're both in two different time zones, Matthew. But thank you for being with me today, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Matthew Ferrara, who's a longtime friend. And just, I don't think you need any introduction really in this industry, but I'm really excited about the topic we're going to do here today. We're really just going to talk about the housing market. Matthew and I had some really interesting conversations recently about what is the housing market, right? Like, how are we, if you're a consumer, what is it? And if you're a real estate agent, how are you making it simple and describing that? Because there's so much conversations around that topic. And it's almost like, do we really even can we take it so far back to simplify what is it? So I'm excited about this conversation today, but I do want to let you introduce yourself, Matthew, for the very few that may not know you.
Okay. Well, so thanks for having me on this session, but also this topic. I really do love this topic. My name is Matthew Ferrara. I have spent 32 years essentially helping the real estate industry grow at all sorts of different levels. So I've helped salespeople enhance their sales skills, companies enhance their leadership and management skills and techniques. I've worked on the technology side of the business, the franchise side of the business, the acquisition side of the business. But mostly what I try to do is help people take the circumstances they find themselves in, especially after more than 3 decades of doing this, and find the best outcomes for their companies, for themselves as agents and company leaders, but also for consumers. So that's really my talent, which is, given the circumstances at hand, how do we create good outcomes for everybody? And that's part of what I do on a regular basis.
That's awesome. I didn't know that your time in the industry is exactly my time on the earth. We never made that connection before. But thank you. So do you want to start us off with just what exactly is a housing market, and if you could describe it?
Sure. So I think it's very important to address this issue of what is a market, because we talk about housing markets and real estate markets all the time. And I think that sometimes we're not all talking about the same thing, whether we're buyers, whether we're sellers, whether we're brokers, whether we're news media. So I just like to clarify a little bit of the nuance around that. To be at the simplest explanation level, a market is whenever a buyer and a seller comes together, whether it's if I'm buying a car and there's a car to be sold, whether I'm buying a computer and there's a computer to be sold. And of course, in the housing market, when there's a home to be sold and a buyer willing to buy it. So very technically, you can have a market of one buyer and one seller, and we call it a market, which is probably the best place to start our definition. And the reason I like to start there is because it helps us understand that there are different size markets. So there are markets at the one-to-one level. There are small markets that we could evaluate in a neighborhood. We can evaluate a part of a city as a market, a whole city as a market, a region of the state as a market, a whole state. And as you can see, we can get bigger and bigger. Regions of the country, the whole country, the Western market, the European market, the Asian market. So markets really are just a little arbitrary way of taking a look at a cluster of buyers and sellers who want to come together and make a deal and come up with a good outcome for them both. And this is an important distinction, because sometimes we hear the term market thrown around and we don't always ask, wait a moment, which market do you mean? Oh, the market is rising. Oh, the market is falling. The market is collapsing. The market is hot. The market is whatever it's doing. And we sort of take it for granted that we're all talking about the same thing. And that's not always the case. In fact, in the same geography, you can have multiple markets. I could take a neighborhood of Boston, and I can have multiple markets going on. There could be a condo market that's doing one thing. So a bunch of people selling condos and a bunch of people buying condos, and it's doing one thing. We can have some single family homes in the same neighborhood, some luxury priced properties versus, say, entry-level properties, and even commercial real estate in the same place. So if someone says to me, oh, well, Matt, how's the Boston market, right? Or how's any market in that case? I have to then ask some questions. Well, what are you really looking to understand? Do you want to know how the condo market's doing? Do you want to know how the first-time buyer price point is doing? Do you want to know, do we want to know about a specific property type or even consumer type? Because there are some people who themselves are part of the definition of the market, whether I'm moving up because my family is expanding, or I'm moving to a smaller space because my kids have gone off to the world and I'm retiring, et cetera. So I know this sounds complicated, but just take it back to the initial definition. A market is a bunch of buyers and a bunch of sellers with something in common. And then we can start to say, well, how is that doing? How is that collection of people and specifics actually performing out there in the economic marketplace?
I love that. Yeah, it's such a good point that there's really, I know you've kind of coined the phrase, like there's really no national market. And when someone says, it's so funny being in real estate, everywhere you go, every time you see, like anybody new, like, oh, you're in real estate, how's the market? Every single time. And they really want to know. But I think that backing it up, like really, why are you asking? What are you right now? And that leads me to my next question. There's a lot of talk about buyer's market, seller's market. And I know for me, I kind of laugh. Like I know people that like, typically you're both, right? I mean, obviously there's first time home buyers, but like by and large, or there might be someone selling, but you get what I'm saying. The majority of people, if you're making a move, you're going to be both. So there's so many people that get so caught up in like, well, it's a seller's market, I can't buy, or it's a buyer's market, I can't sell it. It's like, well, you kind of have to do two things. And so you're probably going to end up on one side or another in a better form. But can you tell us, like, I know there's some fears right now sort of brewing. Do you feel like they're legitimate? Can you walk us through what some of those buyer and seller fears might be?
Sure, absolutely. I love your point about the fact that you're typically in both markets, just at slightly different moments. So if I'm selling my home, I'm excited if it's a seller's market and I feel like I have an advantage over the buyers. But the moment I sell my home, what am I going to do? I'm going to buy. So then I'm in that buyer's market and I don't know, maybe I'm still happy, maybe I'm not happy. So right. I think it's important for us not to put too much weight on markets to begin with. And that's actually a good way to answer, what are we worried about? And I think what we need to worry a little less about is whether we are timing the market right, or whether we've lined up all the perfect moments, trying to beat the trends or leverage the circumstances. Now, there are some important concerns, whether I'm buying or selling. I think they generally boil down to probably two areas. Sellers are always concerned that they're not able to get enough for their home in value, and buyers are always concerned that they're going to pay too much for their home in value. And so that will always be the same, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether it's in the middle, whether interest rates are low, whether interest rates are high. Everybody is always concerned about, I don't want to pay too much, but I also don't want to not get enough, if you will. Now, that's natural. That's pretty much the norm in buying and selling anything. But there are some other things that people are always worried about, and they're usually about timing. They're worried that if I buy now, will the price go up or will the price go down? If I buy now with a mortgage, will I have got a mortgage that's too high or too low? Here's what I try to remind everybody. You're going to buy at a moment in time, but you're going to own for a long time. So if you buy now and your mortgage rate is at a higher level than you expected, let's just say for the sake of argument, 7%. Well, that's going to affect your payment for now and for the next 12 months. Or maybe 24 months. But if you're going to own the home for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, and we actually see data now that shows that more than 50% of people who bought a home in the last 5 years plan to stay in it for the next 16 years. It's a very long tenure that many people are thinking about. They're probably going to refinance 2 or maybe even 3 times during that period. Right. So the fear of, oh, I paid too much or I paid too much for the mortgage is something that we have to help people understand, but you'll be living in it with plenty of opportunity, perhaps, to refinance at a lower rate. That's also true for buyers who think, well, what if I buy and then the house falls X amount next month? Well, it could fall next month, but in 6 months, it could rise. And in 1 year, it could be rising significantly. And so, again, we're always concerned about, did I make a great decision? But this is the kind of decision that actually has to be thought of over much longer periods of time than just this week. What we try to tell people is, if you can afford it this week, this month, this year, if you will enjoy it at whatever level you bought it or sold it, it sounds like the right circumstances for you. And then life will just do what it does, and so will you.
Right. No, those are great points. So hopefully that puts some people at ease. And then kind of doubling down on that, like what questions should buyers and sellers be asking their real estate agent? So like you kind of move past that, you understand it's all going to come out in the wash in some form. Do what's right for you at the right time. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I'm maybe a little bit spontaneous. I laughed when you said 16 months 17 years or 16 years. Like, I think 16 months is probably the longest I've been in a place in the last like 10 years. And that's owning, like, we just kind of keep going. And so arms to me aren't that scary, but everyone's different. But just, you have to think, it's almost like with the market, like, stop listening. These points are just good. And I hope this is what's putting people at ease. Like, stop worrying about the national market, if that even exists. Stop even worrying about your town market, worrying about what you're looking for. That small piece is what you need to be concerned on. And when you're thinking about timing, think about yourself, your family, your situation. That's it. No one else's. And then it gets a lot more clear. Okay, we want to do this right now, or we're going to wait this one out. So hopefully that will help. But then there's going to be real questions that I think suggestions that you have for people that should they be asking their agent?
Well, I think what you've just outlined is excellent advice, right? Move in the direction that's good for you. Now, our homes are very much tied into our identity. So we want to make sure that when we buy a home, we're able to, to some degree, show our friends, family, neighbors that we made a successful move, things are going well in our family. So there is a little bit of sort of extra stress, I think, that's built in, but it doesn't have a lot to do with us. It really has to do with maybe our worry about other people's perceptions. So the more you can stay focused on your own needs and your own goals, the easier that will be. Now, one thing I think every consumer should be asking their agent to do is to help them just pencil out on a piece of paper what they will consider a good deal, a good opportunity. See, a lot of people enter the market and they never actually have an idea of when they're looking at a good deal. And great agents are so helpful in this area because they will say to a seller, listen, if you're asking for X amount of dollars, what if we get $15,000 less? What if we get an offer for $10,000 less? What if we get an offer for $5,000 less? Let's model out how we'll react in those three circumstances. What if we get an offer that's right on the money, but it's not cash? What if we get an offer that's cash, but it can't close for 2 months? You model it, you model it, you model it. You just run through these little scenarios so that when it happens, you don't feel the pressure of having to make the best decision in the spur of the moment. Also true for buyers. Buyers should ask their brokers to sit down and say, listen, help me understand when I know I'm seeing a good deal. Is it a good deal if it has a little bit of work that has to be put into it? Is it a good deal if it only has one garage spot as opposed to 2 garage spots? And how do I think through that? Let me give you just a funny story. It's not related to housing, but it's the same mental exercise. When I leased a car a few years ago, I loved everything about the automobile except for one thing. It did not have ventilated seats. Now, as you know, I live in Las Vegas. It's really quite warm here in the summer. And so I was kind of hemming and hawing a little bit. And the sales lady, she was so fabulous. She said to me, can I just ask you a question? I said, sure. She said, what is holding you back from purchasing this car that you otherwise seem to really love? And I said, well, the truth is I really wanted ventilated seats. And she said, okay, I understand that it's hot here, but let me ask you a question. Do you have a garage at home? I said, yes. She said, do most of the places you go have a garage? I said, frankly, a lot of the places I go have valet parking. I'm not even walking across the parking lot to get into a warm car. She said, so ultimately, when you live with this car, you won't really be getting into it in hot circumstances too often. I said, You're exactly right. I was getting hung up on something that was keeping me from otherwise totally enjoying the opportunity to purchase this car and drive it and enjoy. Same thing with the home. Sometimes we get hung up with the fact that, well, there's only one parking spot and not two. There's only a half bath upstairs instead of a full bath, etc. But everything else is just right. So the most important thing to be asking your broker for help on is, how will I know when I'm actually looking at a deal that's right for me? And it's right for me. It's not perfect for me. Nobody's going to have a perfect circumstance. Also true with finance, also true with closing conditions or anything like that. I think that's more important than trying to micromanage everything about the deal. How do I know if 7% is the right rate or 6.5% or 6.75%? Like, you can get yourself really wound up in some minutia, and otherwise good deals are just passing you by.
I love that. I don't think that could be more on. And I love how we got there, because it's like tuning out all the big stuff that it just doesn't matter to you, focusing in on you. But then the next problem usually becomes just that. My husband and I were just having this conversation this morning, not necessarily about housing, but about life, right? Like, what's enough? When do we stop? Like, okay, what do we want to do? You have to be really specific with your plans. Like, we're in the mode of having a family and kind of figuring out what's our life going to look like in the next 5 years, right? Travel is going to look a little different or whatever it might be. But let's commit to like what's enough and what feels good right now. What's our kind of like, what does it need to look like? Because we can't just wake up every day and wish that it was different, or, oh, look at what they're doing. And I think that's where people get stuck, and something that an agent can be such a good resource, whether you're selling and there's that drop dead number, we need at least this. And then don't get caught up in, what if we got more? Like, nope, you said that was good, right? But we have to work together to get there. And it's such a great point that there are things that you'd love to have. It's almost like dating, like, anyone that's married and has a spouse, like, no one's perfect. You can wait forever for that, but then you can't wake up every morning saying, if only you had brown hair, because that's what I really wanted. Like, it's just, I think that's a really good exercise to do with your agent versus worrying about things you can't control. These are the things we can control, right? So let's stick to these guidelines. And if something needs to be adjusted, we can adjust it.
We naturally get caught up in fear of loss, and a great agent is going to help us get focused on the excitement of gain, on what we're getting. See, one thing about buying a home and even selling a home is that it's not only about what we'll get, it is about who we become. Because when I buy a home, it's moving me to the next chapter in my life, the chapter of that neighborhood, stage of my life, the way I'll live in that property, or that property will help me live. And that's also true when I sell the home, because I'm moving to another stage. I may be moving to another part of town or even another part of the country. I might be moving to larger or smaller quarters, closer to something, further from something. So we often hear in the real estate industry a lot of buyers and sellers who are only talking about the economic formula. They're trying to time the rates. They're trying to time whether it's at the high of the pricing or the low of the pricing, or whether it's going to fall further in a month or 2 months or 5 months. They're timing only the economics about it. But like all products and services, and houses especially so, it's really a much deeper value that we're trying to purchase. We're trying to purchase what that house helps us become, and how living in it will help us move into that next chapter of ourselves. When I talk to agents who are doing excellent work with their buyers and sellers, it's when they help move them beyond just the data. Now, don't misunderstand. Your agents are going to know all the data. That's the mark of a great agent, is they understand the data, the trends of all the markets in their service area, of all the price points, of all the property types, of all the different neighborhoods and sub-neighborhoods. But on top of that, they realize that there's a whole human equation to this process. And so housing isn't like buying or selling a stock. There's a lot more that goes on here. And that's where a great agent is going to help you put both halves of your needs and desires together. And you'll get both a good financial opportunity as well as a good opportunity that just satisfies the rest of your life.
Right. I love that. And then in terms of like jumping over kind of to the media, because I feel like this is sort of that next layer. I think this is something that people should really be using their agent for too, right? So when you get so much, there's so much noise from the media around the housing market, and we've already covered that that's, not something that we should necessarily be using as a resource. What different type of information can and should people be trying to get from their agent? And that's it, with that in mind as their resource versus the news.
Yes. So the most wonderful thing about having a great agent is that they will provide you information that is for you. The media is providing information that is for tens of thousands of people or millions of people, and they have different goals entirely. Now, the media's most important goal is to get you so shocked at a headline that you'll click on it, and then whatever, they're selling ads. They're not trying to provide bad information, but they generally will use provocative information, and it's usually negative. And in addition to that, it's usually very much not relevant to you. You'll hear a story about someone, but that story is about someone in a condo, but you're buying a single family home. That story is about someone who lives in the country, but you live in the city. And yet, the emotions are hot and high and crazy in this story. So you've got to understand that the media's job is to sell advertising. And so they will use provocative data, and they will often use national data that has no relevancy whatsoever. So, housing starts in the builder community are falling. Well, they might be in Tennessee, but meanwhile, in South Boston, they're growing, right? Vacation homes are flat or declining. Well, they might be in some part of the country, but on the Cape, they might be absolutely, doing well. So again, the media's job is to sell ads. Your agent's job is to help you buy or sell and move into the next chapter of your life. So what they're going to do is provide hyper-local information, very specific to your needs to be able to take action. And the other thing that I would keep in mind is that your agent has perspective that the writer of the media probably doesn't. A great agent, even if they've only got a few years in the business or many years in the business, they have the perspectives of the whole rest of their company. So if someone says, well, I'm not sure what was property like in this area 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Great agents who've been around, they might know that. And if not, they go back to one of your offices and they say, hey, who's been selling this area for a while? Who remembers what happened before, during, and after? That's all really relevant context that helps people feel secure and confident to make a move. The media doesn't have any context. It simply has a few paragraphs to get you riled up. And generally, here's what you always have to remember. Whenever the media says things are going awry, what they aren't telling you is that today, tens of thousands of people successfully bought and sold homes, right? Let's just keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. We're going to sell about 5 million homes this year in the United States. Is it less than we sold last year? Sure. But it's still over 13,000 people a day successfully moving on with their lives, buying and selling in what we have to believe is a good deal for everybody, because we don't have 13,000 people a day taking bad deals, and they're all being helped by excellent agents as well. So, the media doesn't point out what's successfully happening, but your agent can, because they have perspective.
No, I love that. And that's what you should be using them for. So on top of using your agent for that, there's also tools that I want to get a little bit into. I know we use Real Scout. And if you could just talk a little bit about Real Scout, we use that for our buyers, but just compared to some of the other tools and how a buyer can use that to help them too.
Well, what's nice about Real Scout and other local tools that your agents are using, Nicole, is that those are fine-tunable. They can be really drilled down into specific properties, neighborhoods, price points, features, and they're able to give buyers and, in a sense, sellers a very granular look at what's happening on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis that directly affects their strategy for selling price and offer price. So that's way different than the kind of data that gets fed into these broad national portals, these Zillow tools, et cetera. That's generally data that's either got a little bit of a delay, or even where it's fairly up to date, it's too generalized. And so if you are on those sites and you're asking for help, trying to come up with a price to sell your home, or you're trying to figure out what to offer as a buyer, those generalizations are not able to get the granularity that a local agent has through Real Scout, through other tools that enables them to, adjust, if you will, not only the data they pull out, but then interpret that data in an effective way. Because remember, your agent doesn't want to send that data out to 100 individuals. They want to personalize that data for you and the next person that they're working with as well. They'll adjust, and they may produce two different, very, very different reports, even in the same marketplace.
Right. No, it really boils down to what we've talked about. So if you're going to use a tool, which we all want to use tools, you could use a tool that's attached to an agent that actually has the market knowledge, right? The Real Scout is the perfect pairing because you can have that at your fingertips. You can be utilizing that. But some of these Zillow, Redfin, things like that aren't attached to a local agent, that you're just not, you're getting that general information that you're getting from the news, really, and getting not really boiling it down.
So I'll tell you an interesting irony about a lot of data that's on these national portals, as well as these major media sites, is that the data is very, very old. Now, when I say very old, believe it or not, 3 to 6 months is too old for someone who's selling a house today. And so we often hear reports that say, and I'm not picking on anybody, but let me use an example, real life example. We hear financial reports and newsletters go out and they say the Case-Shiller housing index says this or that. Now, the Case-Shiller index is very, very insightful, but by definition, it uses data from last quarter. And much of the data from last quarter comes from transactions that closed, that were initiated 30, 60, or 90 days before that quarter. And so they could be reading data that is 3 to 6 months old. Now, that's okay, because as an economist, their job is to look back on data and tell what the story is. But for someone who's in the market, that would be really, really bad information, because we really need to know what offers were made today, this week, or maybe at the most this month on houses like ours. Or if we're buyers, we need to know how many offers are being made that are in competition with us right now, or within the last week or a month. And so again, this is an area where agents who are using very powerful local tools, Real Scout and other company tools, are able to actually help create great advice, insights that, to be honest, the internet and internet-derived content just isn't up to date for, isn't helpful for people who are buying and selling today.
It is true. Yeah. 45 to 90 days to close isn't your indicator. Our indicator that we use from just a company standpoint to look at the market, it's escrow. Like we're looking at what's under agreement. What currently are we looking at over last year, that when that was under agreement, not what closed, because it's not an indicator. Like, we've already really passed that point, and everything that you're looking at, all these general sites, that's what they're doing. And it's like you said, everyone's doing the best they can. But I think that this conversation is just a great reminder that right now is a little bit of a stressful time for people. I think it has been. Everyone's been wondering what's going to go on. And that's why I really wanted to cover this topic with you, because you just, obviously, it inside and out. And I feel like you just did such a great job, hopefully, putting people at ease, putting them at ease, keeping it simple, but also saying, like, your agent really is your best friend in this situation. You want that local knowledge, and try so hard to just focus on your specific market, work with your agent, boil it down. What are your specific needs, and block out the other noise, because it's not helping anyone, really.
I absolutely love that advice, which is your local agent is going to give you the information that really pertains to you. Think about it like any other area in your life. If you had the sniffles and you went online and tried to diagnose it yourself, you might accidentally convince yourself that things are dreadful. And then you might go visit your doctor, who will say, you've got the sniffles, so just take 2 Tylenol and you'll be okay, right? Like, in other words, it's really easy for information to overwhelm us, but a great agent is going to be your best source of understanding that information. And let me just go one step further. It's also important to realize that that agent has a whole ecosystem around them. So you want a great agent that you're personally connected to and personally have strong trust in, but you also want to know that they have amazing colleagues back at their office who can help them, because they're not going to know everything either. So they've got fellow agents, they've got an amazing manager, they've got other staff, they have leaders. In other words, you're basically wanting to set your whole team up in your corner of the buying or selling process. And so when you're talking to your agent, it's important to recognize that they're not only bringing their personal knowledge and skill and expertise, but if necessary, they've got dozens, hundreds of people behind them that can make a big difference. If you line all that up, then, I think you're in a position to navigate any market. That's the last thing I would just leave you with is this. In good markets, people buy and sell homes. In tough markets, people buy and sell homes. And you know who makes that happen? Great agents. They make that happen because it's not about the market. It's what you do with the market that matters most.
I love that. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful for everyone. I'm so grateful for your time, Matthew. And I know you're so generous with your time, although your schedule is crazy. So if anybody has questions or wants to be connected with Matthew, please feel free to email me at nicole@gibsonsir.com, and I will be happy to put you in touch. But I really am so grateful for your time, and I hope that everybody found this helpful.
I've been happy to be part of it, and good luck.